The Appalachian Banshee, Celtic death omen of the mountains in isolated Appalachian hollows. Families still hear the wail that announces death is coming for one of their own. Long before the Appalachian Mountains became known for ghost stories and folklore, they were settling grounds for Scots-Irish immigrants who carried with them something far older than the American Republic itself. These settlers, arriving throughout the 18th century, brought not just their language, music, and farming techniques, but a living supernatural tradition that would survive in the mountain hollows for more than 250 years. They brought the Banshee. The Banshee is not a generic ghost. She is not the residual haunting of a tragic figure or the malevolent spirit of someone who passed away in violence. The Banshee, in her original Irish and Scottish form, serves a specific function within a specific cultural framework. She is a death messenger, a supernatural entity attached to particular family bloodlines, and her distinctive wailing cry announces that someone bearing that family name will soon meet their end. When Scots-Irish families crossed the Atlantic and pushed into the remote valleys and ridges of the Appalachian chain, the Banshee came with them. What makes the Appalachian Banshee tradition remarkable is not simply that it survived transplantation to a new continent, but that it survived with its essential characteristics intact. The Banshee remained what she had always been in Ireland and Scotland, a female presence, heard but almost never seen, whose cry is unmistakable to those who hear it, and whose appearance reliably precedes death within the family to which she is bound. Throughout the 20th century, as folklorists turned their attention to the rich cultural traditions of isolated Appalachian communities, they encountered this living belief system still functioning exactly as it had in the old country. These were not vague folk memories or historical curiosities. These were contemporary accounts from families who maintained that they still heard the Banshee's cry, that they could distinguish it from any natural sound, and that its appearance continued to announce impending death with disturbing consistency. Patrick Gaynor, documenting folklore traditions in West Virginia, collected Banshee accounts that preserved the fundamental structure of the Irish tradition. The families who shared their experiences with Gaynor understood the Banshee exactly as their ancestors had. She was not a general omen available to anyone. She was attached to specific bloodlines. She followed certain families and ignored others. A family with the Banshee knew it, and families without the tradition knew they did not have it. The informants who spoke with Gaynor described the sound with striking consistency. The cry was female in character. It rose and fell in a wailing pattern. It came from outside the house, typically at night. Most significantly, family members recognized something in the sound that marked it as fundamentally different from any cry produced by natural causes. Some families reported that they could distinguish individual characteristics in the wail, suggesting that the entity producing it possessed individual identity rather than being an impersonal force. This last detail carries particular weight. In Irish tradition, some families claim to recognize the voice of their particular Banshee, understanding her as a specific being attached to their line rather than as an interchangeable manifestation of death itself. The survival of this nuance in the Appalachian tradition, documented by Gaynor in 20th century West Virginia, demonstrates the extraordinary fidelity with which isolated mountain communities transmitted cultural knowledge across generations. Leonard Roberts, working in Kentucky, encountered the same tradition functioning in the same way. His informants came from families that had maintained Scots-Irish cultural practices with minimal outside influence for generations. The geographic isolation that characterized much of Appalachian settlement created conditions in which old country traditions could survive without the dilution that occurred in more accessible regions. The accounts Roberts collected treated the death-preceding accuracy of the Banshee's cry not as folklore or superstition, but as established fact. Informants reported that the cry was consistently followed by a death in the family within a specific time frame. This was not presented as belief or interpretation. It was presented as observed pattern, confirmed across multiple generations as reliable as any other natural phenomenon. The consistency of this claim across different families, different valleys, and different time periods presents a genuine challenge to conventional explanation. Either multiple families across a wide geographic area maintained a coordinated fiction for more than 2 centuries, or something genuinely anomalous occurs in connection with the Banshee tradition that deserves serious investigation. The experience of hearing the cry was described by informants with emotional intensity that folklorists found striking. This was not the detached recounting of legend. These were accounts of lived experience, and the experience carried profound psychological weight. To hear the Banshee's cry was to know, with certainty, that someone in the family would soon pass away. The inevitability of this knowledge created a burden that informants described as severe. Some families reported knowing which family member the cry announced. Others heard the wail without knowing who would be taken. Both experiences produced intense emotional responses. The cry served as a warning, but a warning that offered no opportunity for prevention. It announced what was coming, not what might be avoided. This aspect of the tradition distinguishes the Banshee from other supernatural warnings in folklore. Many cultures include omens that allow for intervention, signs that provide the opportunity to change fate through ritual action or behavioral modification. The Banshee offers no such opportunity. Her cry confirms what is already set in motion. Death is coming, someone will be lost. The family can prepare emotionally and practically, but they cannot prevent what the cry announces. Vance Randolph, documenting folklore across the broader Ozark region, encountered related traditions that demonstrated how the Banshee belief adapted to the American mountain environment while retaining its core function. The sound remained central. The female character remained consistent. The attachment to specific family lines remained fundamental. What varied were the peripheral details, the interpretations added by families attempting to understand an inherited tradition in a new context. Some families understood the Banshee as the spirit of a specific ancestor who had taken on the role of family guardian and death messenger. Others maintained the older Irish understanding of the Banshee as an inhuman entity, never human, whose attachment to the family predated memory. Both interpretations preserved the essential function. The cry announces death, and the announcement proves accurate. The question of accuracy remains central to any serious consideration of the Appalachian Banshee tradition. Folklorists documented these accounts as cultural artifacts, as examples of belief systems and oral tradition. They generally did not investigate whether the claimed correlation between the cry and subsequent death could be verified through independent evidence. But the families maintaining the tradition were not presenting folklore. They were describing pattern. They were claiming predictive accuracy across generations. If even a fraction of the reported instances represent genuine precognition of death rather than selective memory or coincidence, the Banshee tradition deserves investigation beyond its value as cultural documentation. The consistency of the accounts, the specificity of the descriptions, and the multi-generational stability of the tradition suggest something more than simple folklore preservation. The Banshee cannot be removed or prevented. This principle, fundamental to both the Irish source tradition and its Appalachian continuation, reflects a particular understanding of the supernatural. The Banshee is not an intruder or an attacker. She is not a demonic force that can be confronted and expelled. She is a messenger, and her message cannot be silenced or ignored. Families who heard the cry understood that their response should be preparation rather than prevention. The death that was coming would come. What remained within their control was how they prepared themselves emotionally and practically for the loss they knew was imminent. This acceptance distinguishes the Banshee tradition from many other encounters with anomalous phenomena. There is no battle, no attempt at removal, no ritual designed to drive the entity away. There is only the cry, the waiting, and the death that follows. The Appalachian Banshee tradition survives into the 21st century in some isolated communities, though folklorists note that it has weakened as mountain isolation has decreased and old country cultural connections have faded. But in communities where the tradition remains living knowledge rather than historical memory, families still report hearing the cry. They still describe it with the same characteristics documented by Gaynor, Roberts, and Randolph. And they still claim that it announces death with the same reliability their ancestors described. The tradition stands as one of the clearest examples of specific Celtic supernatural belief surviving intact in the American context. Its survival demonstrates both the strength of cultural transmission in isolated communities and the possibility that some traditions persist because they describe genuine phenomena rather than merely preserving ancestral stories. Whether the Banshee's cry represents precognitive ability, sensitivity to environmental cues that precede death, or something entirely outside current scientific framework, remains unresolved. What the documented accounts establish is that multiple families across wide geographic areas and long time periods have reported remarkably consistent experiences that they interpret through a stable cultural framework inherited from Irish and Scottish tradition. The wail still echoes in certain hollows. Families who hear it still prepare for loss, and the tradition that crossed the Atlantic 2.5 centuries ago continues to raise questions about the boundaries between folklore and phenomenon, between cultural belief and experienced reality. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.